What makes you a Christian? You see, this is a question that we need to ask if we consider ourselves to be followers and disciples of Christ. I think it's important that we look at two misconceptions when it comes to religion and Christianity and what it means to be made right with God. The first misconception says that if I am good, if I do all the right things and say all the right things and perform all the right things, then God has to let me into heaven. Marcus Aurelius says this: live a good life. If there are gods and they are just, then they will not care how devout you have been, but will welcome you based on the virtues you have lived by. The first misconception says, I need to change myself. At first glance, that seems like a good mindset to have, but is that where salvation is found? The second misconception says, if I am honest, I can't change who I am. I can't change the way that God has made me. This misconception says, I cannot change myself. We see the spectrum of the I need to change and the I cannot change. And it's here in the middle where I think we can find some clarity of what it means to be a Christian. You see, what the Bible actually teaches is that you do need to change and only God can change you. Let's look at this distinction a little closer. The whole reason as to why we need to change is found in Genesis 3. Adam and Eve, God's creation, disobeyed God and ate of the fruit. And ever since then, sin now dwells around us, but it also dwells within us. So yes, we do need to change. But how? Why can only God change me? You see, salvation and justification, being made right before God, first starts by being freed from the punishment of sin. And a punishment against an eternal, holy being deserves an eternal sentence in hell. That's where all those who rejected God, continue to reject God, and finally choose to reject God will be found. We can only be made right before God if this punishment is rectified. And that's why Jesus Christ came. He lived a perfect life and then died on the cross. A perfect man who did not deserve death died, and he rose again, proving that he has justified us before God. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God. We are only saved by faith in the work of Jesus Christ. And that faith is not a work. It is a gift from God. God is the one who changes us. And then the process of sanctification, or that is being made holy while still here on earth until we get to glory, frees us from the power of sin. It is the process in which God changes us. So we see that one, that we need to change, and that two, God is the one who does it. This act of changing is also known as repentance. In Acts 11:18 it says, when they heard these things, they fell silent, and they glorified God, saying, then to the Gentiles also God has granted repentance that leads to life. Through all of this, God is the one at work. So if we are to answer the question, what makes you a Christian? Our response should never start with the words, I did, or I am doing, or I have done. It is only the work of God within us to change us from a sinner into a son. God's grace, God's favor that is poured out to the most undeserving of people, which is you and I. His grace will lead me home, but also he will break me on the journey to get there. So to answer the question, what makes you a Christian? All we can say is, I am a Christian because of Christ.